I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messengers God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives.
Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today, my guest is Meir Ben Moshe, who is a Torah Chacham Rebbe, and welcome.
Thank you, Phil.
And today's prophetic topic is Return to the Light and Serve the Holy One, and this is part 2. Did this about a month ago, a little over a month ago. We did part 1, and what this show is going to be about is the Kabbalah. And we did a little bit of history background, which we'll touch a little bit on today. Then we're going to really try to get into some of the main stuff of the Kabbalah. So our prophetic topic is the work of the Kabbalist. Comes from the book, The Work of the Kabbalist, written by Ze'ev ben Shimon Halevi. And the statement which contains the topic reads as follows. Kabbalah is one of the many disciplines concerned with spiritual evolution. Its system and methods are designed to help those who wish to consciously to return to the light and serve the Holy One. So, before we even get into how that happens, give everybody who's watching just a brief, quick history of what is the Kabbalah. Where does it come from? What does it teach?
Kabbalah is essentially mystical Judaism, and the path in which I study is the path of Nachmanides, which is the Spanish path, and not the path of Moshe Loria. And it basically started in the south of Spain, in Toledo, and it's all about Jewish mysticism.
You know, I know we talked about this last time, and the question didn't come to me. It came today, so I'll ask it. You say in southern Spain. Southern Spain was also, for a long period of time, home to a large Islamic population. Was there an influence on the Jewish population there that kind of just came out of?
No. There were a number of Sephardic Jews in that area, the Spanish Jew. But it was essentially the teachings that Nachmanides came up with, and he had a teacher, and that that teacher was the one that helped him form what we now know as the form of Nachmanides' Kabbalah, or the Rambam.
So one of the things that Kabbalah teaches, which to me is different than what Judaism teaches, is God is in all things.
Yes.
Can you explain why they are different? I mean, if the one is so connected to the other.
Well, it's not that they're different. It's the way in which things are explained, i.e., mysticism and Kabbalah are like siblings. One talks about the issue in one way, and one talks about the issue in another way. And the fact of the matter is, the Hasidic teaching, which is mysticism, talks about the I am that I am is the reflection of God in all things, but not that all things are that of the divine. They are a reflection of the divine. So as a consequence, when we look at things they are really a part of God's creation, but they are not considered to be divine.
Why not?
Because the divine is unknowable.
So the extension of the divine is knowable and therefore is not divine.
The reflection of the divine is knowable, but the divine himself or herself is not knowable.
So that distinction comes in, I don't know, I mean, are we talking Old Testament? Are we talking...
Oh, this has been developed over years, thousands of years. This is not something that's recent. And in the beginning, when the Second Temple was, when the First and Second Temple were active, there was a lot of oral teachings that went along those lines. But it wasn't as I just spoke of them to you. That has become more of a modern day way of explaining what the divine is all about. I'm going to use the word divine and not God.
Okay.
The word God tends to put people off sometimes. And then by not using the word God, it puts another group of people off. So, but I think for the sake of our discussion, I would like to use the word divine as the word for God.
Okay, well, I'm going to backtrack off of that for a second. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord.
You know, hear, O Israel, the God is one. Yeah.
What, I mean, okay, is
the Lord
that
is
not,
God. Yeah,
I mean, God is not sitting there saying, I'm the only God. I mean, this gets repeated in the first commandment, they shall have no gods before me.
Judaism is all about, yes, I know it's your, I understand.
So, I mean, what is, to me, and I don't mean to interrupt, but
No, you're not threatening me.
it seems to be there's a message. God doesn't need to tell us it's the only one, we already know it. Yet, it's telling us that. So is there another meaning into what God is saying, both in this verse and in the first commandment?
Let me backtrack a little bit.
Go for it.
Judaism is about creation, and creation is about oneness. And when we accept and live with that creation, we also were given the world of duality. Before that, there was only oneness. Then with creation, there became the world of duality. And in that world of duality, we were given free choice. And the free choice was to choose the oneness. The passage that you just read was, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. That oneness is what creation is all about.
Okay.
Okay, so if we take it from that place and we go on with creation, we have to look at that teaching now that says we are a reflection of that teaching, not the divine aspect of it, but a reflection of that divineness. And so the Shekhinah, which resides in the material world, is the divine presence, and that's how we relate to this reflection of the divine.
I'd like to get into this a little bit more. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't deny what you're saying.
Right.
But what we're talking about is theory. Is it not? I mean, somebody came up with the concept that we are a reflection of the divine, therefore we are really not divine.
No.
No.
No. The original teaching is that Ein Sof, which is one of the aspects of the divine, and the precursor to Ein Sof, which is Or Ein Sof, which is when the Big Bang happened and when all of creation started to unfold. That aspect of the divine is completely unknowable. It's not possible. The only way we can see that is through the divine's creation, which is a reflection of the divine. And so for us to say we are divine, that's just not how it is. We may be the divine presence. And in that love, then we connect ourselves to the divine. So, and that divine presence, or the Shekhinah, lives in the material world. And that Shekhinah, divine presence, lives with us all the time through our heart space.
I don't want to get bogged down with this. I guess what's really, conversations you and I have had, it's how do we know that the reflection is not divine? How do we know that we're not an extension as opposed to a reflection?
Based on the original teachings. This is an interesting question you pose, because this is the question a lot of people are stuck with. How do we love something unconditionally that we don't see but can feel? So it's all about feeling. So because the language that we use is such, it's not possible to find a word to describe all of this. So anybody who's in the literary business, when they write stories which reveal the essence. And mystically speaking, Kabbalistically speaking, the people who created these stories came from journeys. They'd go off in the desert, they'd sit by themselves, they would have dreams, and from these dreams, they would come up with the essence of what it was that they wanted to talk about. Before these people were teaching, and they taught only through the oral Torah because there was no printing press, and most of them didn't write. They had scribes who translated for them or transcribed for them. So the fact of the matter is, when we talk about these stories, the stories contain the essence, and the essence then touch us. There were people who meditated then. There are stories about Abraham sitting by his tent, which is one of the first recorded issues of someone actually meditating, and how 3 of the angels stopped by to see him, and they had this conversation that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. What we're talking about now is, where did this all come from? How did this all transpire? And unfortunately, what's happened over a period of time to where we got today, the form of spiritual personal practice has changed tremendously. The form of Judaism has changed tremendously. There are 2 forms of Judaism. There's the Israeli form, and then there's the American form. And the 2 of them are very, very different. The original teachings, as written down now in the 4 books of Moses, if one reads the Orthodox teachings, they're very, very redundant, long, and detailed. If one looks at the more modern approaches to all of that, the Reform Jewish path, then it's all condensed down and has a whole different message. Unfortunately, the old method, the old teachings, are so comprehensively complete that following them in a dogmatic manner isn't really what's there, because the stories that are in the Orthodox writings have an essence, and the essence reveals the presence. And so in that way, they come up with something that sounds reasonable. I mentioned in one of our previous shows that one of the major tools that Kabbalah has is meditation. And you mentioned Jacob's ladder. And Jacob's ladder is a part of that. So Jacob's ladder is a way of ascending and descending the tree. So what we have, if I can bring this up, is this is the material world. And may I use your pen for a second? This is the material world. And this is the heavenly world up here. And there are these 4 circles. And these 4 circles are the 4 worlds. And each world is a part of the process of creation. And so what happened with the Big Bang was that this place, or Ein Sof, where the energy that was created emanated down the tree and through the 10 Sephirots. The top 3 Sephirots are separated by a veil. The lower 7 Sephirots are the attributes in which man was created. So if we now go to the temple menorah, which is different than the Hanukkah menorah. The Hanukkah menorah has 9 candles. The temple menorah only has 7. And what it really represents is the tree of creation, or the tree of life. So we start here with the material world being this place and this place. And if we take these candle holders and make them horizontal, then what happens is we have the second issue of what the tree of life looks like. So the temple menorah is really the original form of Jewish visual spirituality.
Intentionally?
What's in Torah, so it must be.
Okay.
And the Star of David is really not about Judaism, but the temple menorah is. And what's interesting, as we've gone through this before, we go from the material world into each pair of Sephirots to the heavenly world. And now there are stories in Torah that talk about the twins, Esau and Yaakov. And Yaakov was a material person who was trying to connect spiritually, and Esau was a spiritual person trying to connect materially. So if you take those 2 triangles and superimpose them, you get the Star of David. On top of that, Judaism, a teaching in Judaism, is about walking in the material world and transcending time and space into the spiritual world. So there's another example about the 2 triangles living in oneness in the present, actually being in the material world but accessing the spiritual world at the same time. So that's our life.
So what we're talking about, let's go back to the Star of David for a second.
Okay.
It's a representation of both the ascension and the descending.
It's about bringing both worlds to the same place.
Well, there's an overlap.
Well, yes, it is. Well,
that's where the 2 of them
meet.
Yeah.
That's where that's the place of balance, place of oneness, the place
at
of
one
the heart.
point,
Yeah.
the top point is the divine, and the bottom point is the human.
In the material world.
The material world. Okay,
Right.
yeah. And so our job is to ascend, and God will descend as far as God needs to descend.
No, that's too
we are.
teleological. No, it doesn't happen that way. No, that's not
Okay.
what it's about. What it's about is, it's on a personal level.
Yeah.
It's a personal level thing. And the way in which one finds the divineness is through our heart space. And that heart space comes at this place in creation. It's called the place of harmony, where loving kindness is here and judgment is here. And this is the balance point. And what's important to know is, number one, that we are a reflection of the divine. Number two, we need to open our heart and allow those emanations of light and energy to enter ourself. And in deep meditation, it is possible then to go from the first world to the second world to the third world to the fourth world. But that doesn't happen without training yourself.
Yeah.
One has to, it's a slow process. It's not something that happens quickly.
But the divine will meet us wherever we are on the journey.
Well, we can discover various aspects of the divine along the trail, yes. So the four worlds of creation. And if we start at the highest level, which is the world of Atzilut, and then the world of Beriah, the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Asiya, we have, at the very top, we have the issue of will, and then mind, then speech, thought, and action. And action then is what happens at the end of all that creative process. So each world has its own specific attributes. And along with each world comes a different level of soul. And as we ascend the tree, then we can backtrack to creation. But once we go to the top of the tree with meditation, then we can descend and actually experience the process by which creation occurred. On the other hand, the soul issue is a different method. The soul then, as it ascends to the highest level of divine presence, the light that enters our bodies, that creates the soul, the more good acts of good deeds and so forth that we do for our fellow mankind, then creates a more clear kind of energy for the soul. So the soul starts off more translucent and winds up very transparent as we get to the fourth world.
So let's bring this into the here and the now for a second.
I'll try.
People are watching.
Yes.
Now, we've already said Kabbalah is one of the many disciplines concerned with spiritual evolution.
Right.
So we have, at least in my opinion, taking it out of the religion per se and putting it into another context. If somebody wanted to be Jewish, they can go to the synagogue, learn how to pray, learn how to kneel, learn how to bow, whatever they needed to learn how to do.
Right. But that doesn't make them feel God's presence.
Exactly.
No, it doesn't.
So this is a spiritual process. Can you, for the people watching, beginner's 101, so to speak?
Yes.
What does that look like?
Doesn't. It's not what it looks. See, that's the whole issue. It's not what it looks like.
Well, what are they supposed to do?
It's what it feels. It's what it feels like. In the material world, as you know, the ego is pretty much in charge. There's a teaching. One of the teachings in Judaism deals with the egoic self or the divine self, the ego soul or the divine soul. And in the lowest level of material being, that part of creation, it's mostly animal soul that's basically ego.
So according to Kabbalah teachings, we're dualistic.
Oh, of course, we live in the world of duality. The whole issue is to walk in the material world and transcend time and space to get to the world of divinity. That's the whole path. That's how you do it. But it's not taught like that.
Keep going. I'll hold off on the questions.
When we're in the material world and the ego is in charge, there's love and there's hate. There's fear and the opposite of fear, and so on and so on and so on. And when the ego is in charge, then it's very, very difficult to sit quietly and be able to detect the divine's presence. So it's about balance. We talked about the Musar path.
Let's go back for a second.
Okay.
You're talking about divine presence.
Right. When you're angry, you're not going to feel divine
No,
presence.
no, I understand that. I guess the question I'm going to ask goes back to our original discussion today. If we're a reflection, how can there be a presence?
Because it depends on what world we're operating in. We can operate in each world simultaneously or individually.
So we are, in studying the Kabbalah, being guided in a form of, to lack of a better term, a shamanic journey.
No, that's very close, because now we're back to Noahide laws, uniformity through diversity. We're all going to the same place, we do it in different ways. And the fact of the matter is, a Hasidic teaching is, and that's why the expression "turn the other cheek" came along, and don't gossip, Lashon Hara, because those are the things that create anger, and anger is considered to be idolatrous.
Okay.
So in the material world, when we're interacting, and we're not balanced between the swing of the pendulum, when we have a dual world, when we live in a world of duality, and we're constantly going from one side to the other side, it's like sitting on the end of a teeter-totter. Your emotions, your feelings, everything are going rampantly wild. But if you sit in the middle of the teeter-totter, those vibrational forms of energy that we're feeling are smaller. In the place of balance, and after practice, and after healing ourselves internally, we can then feel God's love. I can use the 12 steps as a really good example.
Okay.
Codependence Anonymous.
Okay.
Codependence Anonymous. The 12 steps talk about those little steps that wind up in the last 2 steps, which is discovering God and being in God's power. Turning ourselves over to God's will.
Okay.
Okay?
So are you saying the Kabbalah follows a similar structure?
It's a very similar structure.
Okay. So how does, again, would I just sit there and meditate?
Well, under the guidance of a teacher, yes. And then
what does the guidance consist of?
The guidance consists of usually a collective consciousness. After the technique is acquired in a collective consciousness, then the energy rises, and you can sense that rising of energy. After that's accomplished, then it's easy to then take that experience into a private situation and practice.
So, not every, but almost every religion, spiritual practice has a designated meditative structure. How to hold your hands, follow your breath, don't follow your breath, visualizations, mantras. What is the Kabbalist meditation?
Well, it's based on, there's different names for different forms of meditation, but basically what it is getting quiet enough so that one can acquire the balance. And after the balance is acquired, when everything gets absolutely peaceful and very, very quiet, and that usually takes about 30 minutes or so.
Okay, so are you saying then that the meditation is just letting your mind run till it runs out of stuff to run on?
No. There's a designated
There's a technique.
procedure. There's a technique. And in Judaism,
can we share that?
of course.
Oh, okay.
No. Basically, anybody who meditates will know what we're talking about, because you sit in a position with a straight back and a balanced head with hands in your lap, and some people sit full lotus, some people sit half lotus. If you're like myself, we just had new hips, you sit your legs out straight. You can't really get into those positions right away. But the fact of the matter is, it's all about being completely still.
So
You have to acquire that place of stillness. And then you get your mind, you get the monkey mind to go away.
any particular technique for that?
Yes, first you start with a mantra. First you start with a chant, chanting out loud.
Anything in particular?
You can pick almost anything you want, depending upon your path. The one that I like the most is the one that says, basically, God has always been, God is, and God will always be.
Does this
and
have to
will
be
forever
said
and
in
ever.
Hebrew, or could this be said in
You
English?
can say it in English, you can say it in Sanskrit, you can say it in... The
okay.
language itself doesn't matter.
It's the intention.
It's the intention and getting into that place of stillness. And then once the body starts relaxing, and one can feel that after about between 5 and 10 minutes, then one goes into an internal practice. Then the mantra changes. And the basic prayer is the one that we open the program with. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. And then the breathing pattern has to be the same, and the timing has to be the same.
Is there recommended breathing?
Oh, it's a pattern that goes along with what we chant inside, but you can't hear it. We just say it to ourselves.
No, I mean, is it as simple as breathing in through the nose and out through the
Yes.
mouth? Do you follow the breath?
You breathe. You do all of those things. The basic technique in meditation is a consistent breathing pattern, and the count to the breathing pattern can be predetermined. There's no rules about what kind of a breathing pattern it can be, but it's best to inhale through the mouth and exhale through the nose.
Okay.
That brings about the timing that creates the stillness.
Okay.
And by doing that, after 30 minutes, suddenly there's this calm. And following the calm, then suddenly, and by looking to a place that's called the third eye, if you look behind your eyelids and between the bridge of your nose, and just look at that one spot, and you can either look at the spot, or you can imagine there's a candle lit there. There are many techniques to be used. One can stare at that. And so what happens then is that the mind becomes very quiet. And then suddenly, with practice, one gets to that very lofty space that looks like a fluffy cloud. That's the light everybody talks about. But in order to get to that place, in order to get that quiet, you've got to still the mind.
Okay, so now let's tie that back into the levels.
For every person, that's going to be different.
So, I mean...
They may not acquire the full ascension.
Okay.
They may not acquire the full effect of meditation. They may
Why
only...
not?
They're not capable, because they haven't done the practice, they're not capable of going beyond a certain point. But that doesn't matter. You go as far as you can go, and you stay where you're at until suddenly you start making progress. And once you get to a certain place, you know it. And once you get to the final place, you definitely know it. It's not something that people can describe, but it's something you feel. So it's all about acquiring that place of peace, shalom, which is in the priestly benediction, and peace is the other aspect of bringing the earthly plane and the heavenly plane to the same place. And once that's acquired, you feel that peace, then you can begin to feel the harmony, and that's the love space, that's the heart space. And when the heart space opens up, suddenly, when one reaches that place of the light, one can feel it, and all of a sudden we're sitting with the divine.
So we just talked about a technique.
Right.
How does that tie in to the tree? Why do I even have to know about the tree?
Because we're ascending from the material world to the divine world.
So
it's all about nomenclature. I'm sure that there are other lines of belief that don't have stopping points, who don't even acknowledge stopping points. Transcendental meditation is just sit there and go ooh, ooh, ooh till you get there.
I guess what I'm asking is, do I need this visualization to do my meditation?
Not if you. It's only a choice. It's not that you have to have this.
Okay.
It's like an aid. If I'm not Jewish, going up the Kabbalistic tree is an interesting way of doing it. But it takes years of study to understand the interactions of the Sephirots. Don't forget, the lower seven Sephirots are the attributes in which man was created. And so in each one of those Sephirots, there's all that memory. There's all that understanding. We're working with the world of duality. The right, as we look at the tree, the right side is masculine energy and the left side is feminine energy. But the path up the middle is the path of the chariot. It's the path that Ezekiel describes of going from the material world to the divine world.
Which is a combination of both the masculine and the feminine.
That's right.
We find the balance.
That's right. Kabbalah speaks in terms of energetics. It doesn't speak in terms of sex. I.e., this is not the man side of the tree and this is not the woman side of the tree. This is male energy and this is female energy.
Define both of them in characteristics. What distinguishes them?
Male energy is more kinetic in nature. Female energy is more potential. Male energy is more piercing. Female energy is more waves of consciousness. Male energy is about the past. Female energy is about the future. That's why in Judaism, when there's marriage, the man brings the past into the present, and with the woman they get to the future, with almost all aspects of our being, of our creation.
So one of our jobs in meditation is to blend and balance the two energies.
That's right, and that's the path in the middle. And that's the path of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. The divine presence goes from the material world to the spiritual world, to the divine world, in what Ezekiel calls the chariot.
Do we consciously, let me take this into another context for a second. There are methods of meditation that guide us in the raising up of our life force energy through the chakra system. Is this doing the same thing in a slightly modified system?
If I believed in the Hindu path and studied the Hindu path and understood all that stuff, then the Hindu way of meditating would work for me. But because I'm a Jew, this works for me. But I learned the Hindu path first.
But is this based on the same? Is this a variation of the same information? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes, it is.
So we're raising up a life force energy, or the 12 steps, having had a spiritual awakening.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So the whole purpose of Kabbalah is to guide us in that process of spiritual awakening.
That's right. But it's based. Kabbalah is based on many of the stories in Torah. If you go to the Hindu path, it has different teachings.
Yeah.
But the Shakti is the same as the Shekhinah in terms of energy. So if you're in the Hindu path and you meditate, you meditate by finding that place of balance, and then the Shakti, as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into your meditation, the Shakti goes up your spine and you find yourself at the high place. In Kabbalah, you start off at the bottom space and you stay balanced. That's what Nachmanides teaches Loria doesn't teach that. No, Loria teaches the recapturing of holy sparks because of the energy that was there for creation to happen in the first place. But Nachmanides was a Spaniard. Nachmanides was all heart. Nachmanides was a teacher and a doctor. And he sat down and had this dream and found that if you balance your life in this world of duality, i.e., if one acknowledges the fact that in the beginning there was nothing, and after creation there was the word of duality, and we were given this world to live in, and then in this world of duality we were given free choice to choose, and it was that choice that allows us to choose the oneness, and that choice allows us to stay in that place of balance by incorporating more divine soul into our lives than ego soul.
What, you talk about the teachings in the Torah. And maybe before we even go further with this, why don't you explain for people watching who might not know, what is the Torah?
Oh, the Torah, it's the written, supposedly the written word of God. It was the tablets that Moses came down the mountain, Mount Sinai, with. And they're cast in stone. So the written Torah is cast in stone. It is immovable. It's there, and between the letters, it takes the oral Torah to explain what's there, which is called the Talmud. So initially, there was the oral tradition that taught what the written tradition said on those tablets. And then with time, the priests and the rabbis and the very learned scholars then came up with the 5 books of Moses, the 4 books of Moses.
I thought there were 5.
Yeah, the last one, 5, yeah.
Back to stuff for a second.
Yeah.
Maybe my own ignorance of the whole story. I thought the only thing on the stones that Moses came down with was the 10 Commandments.
Yes, but there was a space between. There was a space between the numbers. And the first half of the tablet is about the spiritual world. And the second half of the tablets are about the material world. And the middle one, thou shalt honor thy mother and father, is the middle one. And that's the one, that's the place of balance between the higher world and the lower world. So what has happened is, within each commandment, there is a meaning. And that meaning then was expanded upon by the scholars and written down once we got the printing press or scribes.
So we have the tablets.
Mm-hmm.
They lead to the Torah. The Torah leads to...
The Talmud.
Okay, what is the Talmud?
The Talmud is the oral Torah. The Talmud allows flexibility for changing times, to rehash and look at what is written down and see how it applies to our lives today. For instance, we don't sacrifice anymore. It was an offering of oneself to God,
Yeah.
to the divine. And that's what the sacrifice was about. But today, that's been replaced with prayer. So today we offer ourselves up through prayer, not through animal sacrifice. Everybody gets upset when they read the Torah. Oh, they killed this one, they killed that one. You know, it was like a slaughterhouse. There was blood everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And it was. It was like that then. But now, then once the temple, the second temple was destroyed, then our homes became our temple. And in our homes, we prayed. And that's why Shabbos is such a big deal. As the 7 chakras are the big deal, the 6 days to Shabbos, the 7th day of Shabbos. And that's the day we're supposed to sit, not do any work, not spend any money, study, and pray.
Okay, so now, the in-between, we have an oral tradition, and then from what we've kind of cobbled together between the Torah and the Talmud to create the 5 books.
Well, the five books evolved with time, with the prophets.
Okay. I guess the point I'm trying to get to, and I'm going to have to break away. I've got to make some announcements. Why is there a separation between Kabbalah and traditional Jewish teaching?
The priests did it. The very learned scholars laid down rules as to who would learn Kabbalah and who would know the secrets and who would not know the secrets.
Why?
Because it turns out that before one could study the Kabbalah then, you had to be at least 40, you have to be married, and you have to have children.
Well, that
Those were the
eliminated
rules.
almost everybody. They didn't live much beyond 40 back then anyway.
Well, it didn't matter. That's what the rules were. And one of the things that they experienced was that if you didn't accomplish certain things in the material world when you were younger, if you started to study Kabbalah, you'd get lost at the top of the tree and never come back down and become functional. And there are people today who actually escape, and it's very important to know how to come back down the tree once you get to the top or near the top.
Why?
Because you wind up in this fluffy, white, unconditionally loving place. And who wants to come back in the material world and hassle with all the other things that make life work?
But I mean, what you're talking about becomes, in my interpretation, what they would call self-realization process, which is practiced by Hindus, it's practiced by Sufis, it's practiced by a lot of religions, where you basically lock yourself away till you get to that place, and then you come back into the world and carry that message with you.
The Noahide laws, all over again, it's human uniformity through diversity. You can get to the same place, you can do the same things in different ways. That's why I started off, that's how our relationship started off when you said to me, what are we going to talk about? And I said, the Noahide laws, because once we get to a certain place spiritually, once the Jewish Messiah appears, we're all going to be the same. We're going to have the same rules.
We have the same rules. We're all chasing what I believe is the same God.
The same divine presence. Yeah.
Yes, the same divine presence.
Right.
Then the only thing that would modify our experiences is how much ego bleeds into that experience.
That's exactly right. That's why you have the two pillars. You have the pillar to the right and the pillar to the left, and the easiest relationship to understand is Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed is loving kindness, and Gevurah is judgment, and its middle point is Tiferet, harmony.
Yes.
That's the balance. That's the heart space. That's why.
We'll come back to that in a second. I got to do these announcements.
Okay.
But I like that heart space.
Yes, I mean, if you know that stick figure that's in every Kabbalah book.
Okay.
You know which one I mean, where you have the head and the neck, which is the Hebrew letter. You make your announcements. We'll get back to that. We'll get lost in it.
Okay. Very good. Wow. Stay tuned. We're not going away. Couple of announcements to make. First, number one. This is public access television. And you, the public, are the people who are watching it. We're here for you. So I'd love to hear from you. Comments, criticisms, shows you'd like to have done. Maybe there's a show you'd like to do with me. My contact information has been and will continue to flash and runs at the end of the show. So I'd love to hear from you. Secondly, I am besides being a minister, I am a state licensed counselor, and I do what I call spiritual counseling. I do not believe that without a spiritual component we can heal. I do not believe that we can solve our problems with the same instrument that creates our problems, which is what the rabbi and I have been talking about, which is basically ego. Ego is not going to cooperate with you. You have to take yourself to a higher plane. Like we were talking about, ego is at the very bottom, divine is at the top, and the more we raise ourselves in that system, whatever system it is, the more we have distinction and power over ego. And that's the way I work with my clients. I know times are tough, economy is bad. I work on a donation basis, so don't let money become an obstacle. God takes care of me. It doesn't necessarily have to come through you. So if there's problems in your life, things you'd like to talk about, maybe you just want to work on some spiritual growth, be happy to work with you. Give me a call. We can set up an appointment. The other announcement I want to make, a good friend of ours, Shubraji, who has been on the show a couple of times, and she will be my guest in 2 weeks. She's in town as of today and starts some free teachings tomorrow, which is Tuesday, which you're not going to hear this, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So you'll hear this by Thursday night. It'll be over. Forget that one. Okay. But there will be a teaching Monday through Wednesday, November 7th through the 9th, from 7 a.m. until 8:30 a.m. at the Vedic Chant Center. It's upstairs, and it's going to be Yoga Vashita Sara, the essence of Advaita philosophy. There's also on Friday, November 11th, 7 o'clock to 8:15, and that's going to be at the Spandarama Yoga Center on Early Street, Embracing the New Energies. It's going to talk about the day it's happening, 11/11/11. There's also going to be a chanting workshop, which has a cost. The stuff I mentioned before is free. The chanting workshop is going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 4th, 5th, and 6th. And that's going to be also at the Vedic Chant Center. But like I said, there is a fee and a need to register. So if you want more information, contact Ariana at 570-0743, or contact me and I can give you the contact information. But these are wonderful teachings and they are free to the public. Okay, we're back. We got about 5-6 minutes left. Let's talk about the heart space. Is the heart space in the Kabbalah the actual physical heart, or is it separate from the physical heart, or is it two things that come together at the heart?
They're the focus.
Okay, the physical heart.
They're the focus of the heart space. And it's not like there's a big red heart sitting there, but most of the Kabbalistic trees of life are represented by the Sephirot Tiferet, which is harmony. And they're almost always yellow or a sun that's radiating out energy.
So, as I do the meditations, will I get to a place where that visualization happens?
The feeling happens, not the visualization.
Feeling, okay.
The feeling happens.
So it's a feeling of peace, a feeling of love.
That's right.
A feeling of being at one.
That's right. Once the balance occurs and one feels the peace, that's where you're at. That's how you feel it.
Is the heart the center point between the upper and the lower? Is that the overlap point?
Not really. It depends on who grows the tree. You can move it. You can move it to where it's between, but it's not far. It's not far. It's this Sephirot here. It's this Sephirot here. And this space is called the space of knowledge, dot. And dot is where the veil occurs between the upper world and the lower world. So it's possible that some person could move that Sephirot to this space because it's the balance point between loving kindness and judgment. So that, and at that point, it separates the lower world from the higher world. But the separation is really right there through the middle of dot, or knowledge. So when we look at Chachma and Bina, which is wisdom and understanding, the balance point between those two is knowledge, or dot. And dot then becomes the channel.
So the higher up on the tree we get, the more we get into more spiritual principles.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So
it's now no longer between, for lack of better terms, harmony and disharmony. It's about varying degrees of harmony at a higher level.
That's right. And dot was the forbidden, that was the expulsion of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. They wanted the knowledge. And if you go to Noah, the reason the floods came about was this attempt to acquire knowledge. So they built the Tower of Babel. And that's when all the different languages were brought into play, so that the cooperation was gone and they could never get there. But let's backtrack just a little bit, because you mentioned something that's really important.
About a minute and change left. So go ahead.
Chachma is represented by the Hebrew letter Yud, which is like a little comma with a tip at the top.
Okay.
The tip pierces the divine world and becomes the head and the neck and a stick figure. Bina, or understanding, which is feminine, is represented by the Hebrew letter He, which forms the shoulder girdle. So you have the horizontal line, which is clavicles, okay? And then you have the arms that hang down. Then when you get below, and you get these other sephirots involved, except for the very last one, you get the letter Yud, which forms the trunk. So now you have the head, the neck, the shoulder girdle, the arms, and the trunk. And then when you get to the lower sephirot, the world of materialism, you get the other He, which becomes the pelvic girdle, and you get the pelvis and the two legs. So, and that's a very popular, very popular thing to show up in every Kabbalah book.
I need to cut that off. I thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank you for tuning in. The one quick announcement I forgot to make: next week, my guest is Pablo Flores. He is a minister, he is a musician, and he is an artist. And we're going to have some interesting creativity here. So till next week, know that you are one with the divine. Use it. Make your life different. Change it. It gets better. It doesn't have to get worse. Blessings to you all.
Baruch Hashem.
I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.